Today marks 2 weeks since I, 23M, made the gut-wrenching decision to end things with my boyfriend, Nick, 22M. The breakup wasn't dramatic or full of fiery confrontations. There wasn't any yelling, no accusations flying across the room. It was more like a slow, suffocating realization that the person I thought I could trust had been lying to me. I had my suspicions, but what really broke me was the discovery of Nick's betrayal, the fact that he had been seeing someone else behind my back. I found out in the most ridiculous, yet painful way. I went through his phone. I didn't want to invade his privacy. I really didn't. But something inside me was nagging at me. It was this tiny voice that wouldn't leave me alone, whispering that something wasn't right. So, one night, unable to shake off the feeling, I grabbed his phone and went through it. What I found nearly destroyed me. There were endless texts between him and someone I didn't even know, and they weren't just casual chats. No. They were intimate. Messages filled with "baby" and "I love you." Words I had never imagined seeing, especially not from Nick. The emotional connection between them was clear, and it tore me apart. I'd suspected something was off for weeks. He'd made a new friend a month ago, someone he'd started spending more and more time with. But to see it laid out in black and white, to see them exchanging promises and affection, was devastating. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It's been about 6 months since Nick and I moved to the US to start a new life together. We came here with high hopes, full of excitement, and dreams of building something from scratch. At first, everything felt perfect. We were living with my sister and her husband, kind, generous people who took us in when we didn't have anywhere else to go, and it felt like the perfect opportunity to start fresh. Those early months were full of laughter, adventure, and the kind of joy that comes with living in a new country. We explored new cities, bought a car, adopted a dog together. It felt like we were building a life that was meant to last forever. But, as with any honeymoon phase, the magic started to fade. The newness of everything wore off, and the reality of being so far from home started to sink in. Homesickness hit us both hard. For me, it wasn't easy, but I had my sister to lean on, and slowly, I began to adjust. Nick, on the other hand, was struggling. He missed his family, his friends, and his old life. His job wasn't going well, and he wasn't able to connect with his coworkers. He felt isolated, cut off from everything that had once been familiar to him. I could understand how he felt. I missed home too. But I had someone here who understood, and that made all the difference. As time went on, Nick's loneliness grew more and more apparent. He had a couple of friends here, people he'd known before, but it was clear that it wasn't enough. He felt like a stranger in this new world we were trying to create together, and as much as I tried to comfort him, I couldn't fill the hole he was feeling. And then came the guy he met online. Nick had been talking to him for a while, and at first, I didn't think much of it. I tried to be understanding. He needed someone to talk to, someone who understood what he was going through, so I tried not to be jealous or overbearing. But as the days went by, I noticed something changing. The time Nick was spending with this guy was growing. They'd text all day, play video games together, and talk for hours on the phone. I didn't want to be that boyfriend, the one who demands his partner's undivided attention and gets upset over every little thing, but something felt wrong. It wasn't just friendship anymore. Nick was investing more time, more energy into this guy than he was in our relationship. And that made me uncomfortable. It made me feel like I was being pushed aside, like I was no longer a priority. So I spoke up. I told him how I was feeling, how it hurt to see him so absorbed in someone else. I asked for balance, for us to share our time and energy. I wasn't asking him to cut ties with this guy, but I needed him to acknowledge that I was still his partner. Nick's response was that he needed this new friendship because he felt like he had no one else. He didn't want to let it go. I tried to understand, but it stung. It felt like he didn't see the hurt I was going through, the loneliness I was battling as well. Things got worse after that. The more I expressed my concerns, the more Nick pulled away. The other guy never made any effort to be friendly or even acknowledge me, and it was clear that Nick was choosing him over me. That's when I asked him outright, "Do you have feelings for him?" Instead of denying it, Nick said something that completely shattered me. He said, "I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. This is all just weird." How could he not know? How could he be so confused about something so important to me? The next day, after our argument, Nick was invited to a party at this guy's house. Despite everything that had happened, he really wanted to go. I let him, albeit reluctantly, and he promised to keep me updated. He was running late, so I let him take our car. When he came back that night, I had to know if anything had happened. Had they kissed? Was there something more between them? Nick swore nothing had happened, just a hug, he said. But something still didn't sit right. That night, I caught him on the phone again with the guy. He was drunk, he said, just checking in. That was the moment I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed his phone, went straight to Snapchat, and there it was. Messages that confirmed my worst fears. "I love you, baby," and more. Even explicit videos. My heart sank, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I confronted him right then and there, but Nick tried to grab his phone back. In a blur of emotions, I ran out of the room, unable to look at him. In that moment, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the other guy. I needed to know the truth. And when he picked up, he didn't even try to deny it. He admitted everything. He and Nick had feelings for each other, and he didn't care that Nick and I were having problems. He even admitted that he had broken up a couple in the past, out of jealousy, and didn't see anything wrong with doing it again. I told Nick it was over. I reminded him of the trust we'd built, of the fact that this all happened under my family's roof, the very people who had taken us in when we had nowhere else to go. I told him to leave. I told him to call his friends for a ride. But instead of fighting for us, instead of apologizing, Nick just stood there. He didn't even try to make it right. He left with the other guy. The days that followed were a blur. Thanksgiving came and went, but it felt hollow, empty. Nick didn't leave immediately. He stayed with the other guy's family during the holiday, said he felt obligated to help them out. I couldn't stop myself from feeling like I'd made a mistake. Should I have tried harder to work things out? Should I have let him stay? But deep down, I knew I had no other choice. He'd crossed a line, one I couldn't overlook. As the days turned into weeks, I reached out to Nick. I told him I was sorry for kicking him out. I told him I wanted him to come back. We had so many plans together, our car, our puppy, everything. But when I suggested we find a place of our own, his response was cold. He said he was rethinking everything. He needed time. Time to focus on what was best for him, individually. He didn't want to move back in with me. He didn't want to get a place together. Instead, he started pulling away even more. He told me he'd take his name off everything we shared, our car, our phone bills, everything. He was making it clear that he was done with the life we built. And it hurt. He even told me he'd keep going to the gym where the other guy went because it was more convenient. It felt like he was already building a life without me. I kept reaching out, hoping for a sign that he wanted to work things out, but Nick's responses were always the same, distant, cold, uninterested. He never checked in on me. I had to be the one to start every conversation. And each time I opened up, he got frustrated, irritated with me, as if my feelings were a burden. Every day my heart aches. I feel like a part of me is missing, like I'm losing the person who was once my best friend, my partner, my everything. And it hurts so much more because I still love him. I still want him back. I want to fix this. I want him to come back, to choose us, to choose me. But every day, he pulls further away. Every day, he moves on without a second thought, leaving me here, drowning in silence. I tell myself I deserve better, that I can move on, but a part of me is still holding on to the hope that he'll realize what we had. That he'll come back and fight for it. I'm not ready to let go.